All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Startup Fuck Up. Today, I have with me Kevin Palmieri. Is that the right way to say your name?
Yes, sir, it is.
Great. Kevin is the CFO and one of the founders of Next Level University. He comes from a lot of experience around coaching and helping people develop themselves, both as a business person, but also as an individual as well. So I really resonate with that angle on personal development as a focus and leadership as a focus. So Kevin, welcome to the show. I'd love to have you tell our listeners a bit about yourself, a bit about kind of how you ended up on the journey that you're on.
Yeah, sure. So number one, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. And I think at the simplest level, Chin, I am just somebody who wants to help other people. I think when you think about it, humans really, when we're searching for our purpose, it usually ends up being we want to help a unique person in a unique way, and we want to help them solve a unique problem. So that really is what I try to do every single day. I grew up in a house and I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. So I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27. And I was the type of person who I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I did know I didn't want to go to college. I knew that from a pretty young age. So I ended up job hopping around for a while, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. I couldn't find what seemed to be my thing, quote unquote. And I ended up getting this very unique opportunity in an industry called weatherization, where we would go into buildings and we would make them more energy efficient. And the beautiful part of this was, since I was working on state-owned buildings, I'd make anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour. As a 23-year-old man with no college degree, that is wonderful. And I thought I had made it, quote unquote, and found success. But a few short years later, I ended up sitting on the edge of a bed debating suicide because I was so miserable. And I was the type of person who looked like they had a really successful, fulfilling life, but I was super insecure and I didn't like myself. I didn't like what I was doing. I wasn't confident. I wasn't excited for the future. So I already had a podcast at this point, but I ended up leaving that job that was bringing me so much discomfort. And I went all into podcasting. And in the very beginning, nobody was listening and nobody cared, but we cut our teeth in the beginning and figured out, okay, how do we turn this podcast thing into a business? And what does our audience want? What does our audience need? What are their problems? And here we are 6 years later, and I get to do it every single day. And I feel like I quite literally am living the dream. Although someday the dream has nightmares, I think that's kind of par for the course.
Yeah, a very, very interesting journey. And to that note, I'm curious to hear you elaborate a bit more on this. And I think probably no one person has the magic bullet for this question, but I'm curious to hear your angle on it. So oftentimes I hear a lot of people talk about, understanding what is your purpose and kind of what your passion is, because once you set yourself on that path, you tend to find yourself in better alignment, more fulfilled, more happy. And you kind of alluded to a bit of that when you talked about your journey transitioning into doing your podcast and supporting people. What have you found worked in your case? Or maybe it wasn't some specific formula, maybe you stumbled across it, but how did you come across your purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. I stumbled across it. And here's why I say that. I think most of us think we're looking for our purpose when in reality, we're looking for the vehicle to deliver our purpose. And the only reason I say that is I've always liked helping other people. And I know it's not very specific and it's kind of broad, but I've always liked helping other people and it has always fulfilled me. And what really shifted for me is I was interviewed on a podcast. And after the podcast, I said, imagine if you could do that for a living. Imagine if you could have conversations about something you loved for a living. One of my buddies said, you can. I mean, there's people out there that do it. So for me that day, my vehicle was presented to me, and then at least I was able to take action on that. I think for a lot of us, we think we have to go searching for our purpose, when in reality, usually our purpose comes from some level of pain, some level of discomfort, some level of regret, and we just don't know how to bring it into the world. We have this thought of, well, yeah, I'd like to help people, but how am I going to make that profitable? I'd like to help people, but what does that even look like for me? I think for most of us, we have to reflect in order to find our purpose, because we most likely have already experienced what the purpose is. But I think we have to test vehicles. And It might be, it could be a YouTube channel. It could be creating a product or a service. It could be a podcast. It could be speaking, whatever it is. But I think you have to test the vehicle, because I do believe at a deep level, if we reflect and we say, what has been some of the hardest times in my life? What is something that I solved that I know a lot of other people are still dealing with? I think those questions are really important and impactful, but until you have the vehicle, it's really hard to take action on your purpose.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that perspective.
Of course.
One thing I also find is that purpose can change over time for people. Like, if you're in your 20s, maybe your purpose is one thing, and then maybe if you are in your 40s, you might have shifted or changed the angle as well. So that's entirely okay. So to the listeners out there who are kind of on that path and kind of lost, it's okay to feel a bit lost, and it's okay to not have a clear answer right away. At least to my sense, like I've seen my purpose shift over time as well, as I kind of explore different things, or as you say, test those different vehicles. So definitely don't be afraid to go out and experiment. But at the end of the day, be intentful with your time. So don't just squander your time because you don't know what you want to do. Make sure you make the most out of the time and learn while you can. I'm curious to hear your answer to another question, somewhat related to purpose, because we're also going to dive into the topic of pricing today. I strongly believe that values, like if purpose is the why, values is the how. And I think I want to talk a bit about values and ask your perspective on your values, because I find that a lot of the decisions that we make, both personal and business, are typically grounded in our personal values. So, for example, I may have pros and cons to, let's say, if I'm faced with the decision, should I work for a startup? So my pros and cons might be very different from your pros and cons, because let's say, I'm a family man, I have kids, maybe I am less risk averse, I'm more risk averse, and I'm more focused on that stability, kind of that balance. In some other cases, maybe someone else is really adventurous. They're pursuing certain, ambitions. They want to grow quickly. Then in that case, their pros are very, very different. So I'm curious to hear, what have you learned about kind of value discovery, and also what are your personal values?
I didn't understand this in the beginning, but if you think about what are the movie characters, what are the television characters, what are the musicians, who are the athletes, that, like, if you think about that and ask yourself, why do I look up to those people? That is a pretty good indication of your values, because you'll think to yourself, so at least for me, this is how it happened. I resonated with certain movie characters. It was usually the underdog, but it was usually the underdog that protected other people. I am a huge fan of hockey. I don't watch it as much as I used to, but I always really, really liked whoever the enforcer was on the team. And all that means is this is the person that fights for the other people on the team. And that helped me realize that one of my values is standing up for people who don't always have the ability to stand up for themselves. But I was able to connect that by saying, why do I really like this movie character? Why do I really like this actor and the way they show up? Why do I really like this athlete or this artist? So for me, there is a level of understanding in what you look up to. There's a reason you look up to the people that you look up to. So that's how I really started to understand it. And then I would look and I would reflect on my life and say, oh, okay, what relationships of mine worked really well? Oh, this one, this one, this one. Oh, we had very, very similar core values, right? We were both people who were into self-improvement. We were both people who are into fitness. We were both people who focused on humility. So that helped me also understand that the most aligned relationships I've ever had were also the ones that had the most aligned core values. And a couple of mine are, one is humility. I don't know. I think sometimes people get really good at something and they forget what it was like not to be. And that's something I don't ever want to lose. I always want to understand at least what it's like to be a beginner. So humility is very big for me. Self-improvement is a big core value of mine. I think it's very hard for me to be myself around people who don't value self-improvement, because that's one of the things I talk about more often than anything else. And then for me, a big one is charity. It's very important to me to give back, and not just in monetary ways, but even energetic ways. I always want to leave every interaction with a little higher energetic set point than it was when I got there. That's very important to me. I think you hear a lot of people talk about, what's your legacy? And I think people think of legacy as when you're dead, what are people going to remember you as? I try to think of it as when I leave that room, how is that person going to remember me? And then based on how they remember me, how are they going to live their day? I think that's just a unique perspective to have. So that's another one of my core values is just positivity, leaving an environment a little bit better, whatever that means, than it was when I got there. That's something I'm very big on.
Great. Love it. I love that it's a very actionable piece of answer that you gave there. Like reflect and look at the people who you idolize, the folks who you want to emulate. And they usually have the personal values that you care about as well. So yeah, that's a really good practice. And I like that approach because I find, if anything, it's a little bit easier to define your personal values compared to kind of defining your purpose or your mission, which is that big, hairy thing that you think as your North Star, right? So yeah, start with your values. And then from there, you can start to evaluate opportunities based on, do these resonate with my values? Are they in line with me? Or are they something that kind of rub against me because, maybe I don't like this kind of person, or I don't like this opportunity because it doesn't resonate with those values that I care about.
And even when you're getting like a partner for like, if you're starting a business, you're a startup and you're trying to figure out, should I partner with this person? A great question to ask yourself is, do we have aligned core values? Do we have aligned core beliefs? And do we have aligned core aspirations? If you're misaligned with those things, that is when resistance is created, because you're not necessarily, if you're not in it for the same reason, that's going to create resistance. If you don't want to get to the goal in the same way, that's going to create some resistance. And if you do not believe in what you're doing and the other person does, that's going to create resistance as well. So I think those are also 3 places to look, especially when you're partnering up with somebody.
For sure, 100%. So maybe before we jump into the topic of pricing today, tell us a bit more about Next Level University. Kind of what does it do? How far along is it? Kind of what motivated you to kind of be on this path, and how did you explore monetizing kind of the venture?
So we started Next Level University in 2017. It was under a different name. It was the Hyperconscious Podcast then, but then we ended up rebranding, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago. It really started off as just a podcast. It was, we're going to do an episode a week, and that's kind of that. So after I left my job, I obviously wasn't making any money anymore. And we were really focusing on our character and trying to become better men and trying to understand our audience and trying to serve and add value. So we didn't make money for probably 1.5 years or 2 years. And this is how it started. I went to my business partner. I said, I'm $35,000 in credit card debt. I need to start making money, or I'm not going to quit, but I just don't know how I'm going to survive. And he said, all right, well, we have a self-improvement company. We're going to start coaching people on self-improvement. And I was like, okay, I don't know what that means. I've never coached. I don't know how to do it. Where do we start? And he said, we start for free. So I literally reached out to somebody in our audience and I said, hey, I'm looking to do some beta testing for some coaching. All it is, it's a deeper dive of our show. So I'm going to work with you on peak performance. I'm going to work with you on mindset, on relationships, on money. Do you think that's something you would find value in? And she said, yeah. And I said, all right, cool. It's totally free. Let's do it for a couple months and see what happens. And I went to 5 or 6 people and I said that, and I ended up having 5 or 6 free clients. And after a couple months, I went back to them and I said, hey, I can't do this for free anymore. What do you think of $50 a week? And they all said yes, much to my surprise. So I went from not making any money to making whatever it was, $250 a week, which for me at the time was very, very, very big. So that's how it all started. And then it kept up with that. But then we had this realization that, okay, we have to actually build a business. So Next Level University is the podcast, but we also have one-on-one coaching and group coaching and retreats and events. And then under that, we have a bunch of different businesses that we thought, okay, what did we need as a business in the beginning? So we have a web service team, we have a social media team, we have a podcast production team. We have a bunch of different stuff in there. And it really was, what did it take for us to get to where we are today? And how can we add value to other people's lives who might be on a similar mission to us? And that's really how it has evolved over the last 5 or 6 years. A lot of the things I do on the day-to-day, I didn't even expect to do. And that just wasn't in the plan, right? So things have changed a lot, but they've changed in the most aligned ways.
Thanks for sharing. Sorry
Of
about the
course.
background noise. It's my kid.
Oh, no, you're good. I couldn't
Um,
hear anything.
cool. I think your journey is quite common and typical to what other entrepreneurs go through. They typically start out offering a free beta trial. They test it out, and then from there they start to have a small minimal cost, and then eventually they start to explore different revenue streams. Tell me a bit about what have you learned in hindsight, looking back at how you started out. Do you think you should have done it differently? Do you think you were underpricing? Were there any key lessons that you could take away from that?
It's interesting. I would try to do a better job of really sifting through the information I was getting from mentors, because this is the interesting thing. A lot of the people from my past and a lot of the people that I've learned from through content, they're people who are selling to very, very, very confident human beings. So it's different when somebody says, "Hey, you're not charging enough." If somebody doesn't say, "Oh my goodness," when you tell them the price, your price isn't high enough, I don't believe in that anymore. I think maybe with somebody who is not very risk averse, somebody who is quick to make decisions, and somebody who is quick to invest, yeah, maybe that is good, right? Maybe you having somebody question your pricing because it's so high, it makes them say, "You know what? I really want to be a part of this." But the psychology between somebody who doesn't believe in themselves a lot and somebody who does believe in themselves a lot is completely different. So if you think of it this way, somebody who's very confident, they want to hear, "You know what? This probably isn't for you." Because they're going to say to themselves, "No, no, no, this is for me. I am the type of person who would do this. How much is it?" "That's 15,000. You know what? That's fine. I am the type of person who would do it. I'm in." Where somebody who doesn't believe in themselves, they don't want that resistance. They don't want that perspective. They don't want that reflection. They don't want to say, or they don't want to hear, "Hey, this isn't for you." They want to hear, "Hey, this is exactly for you." So I think in retrospection, I would be very, very weary of the potential clientele that the people that I was learning from were suggesting I make my decisions on, because it's different. I think sales, pricing, I think all of that is different depending on the end user. And a lot of my mentors, their end users were drastically different than ours. And I don't think I understood that in the beginning.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. And the reason why I want to thank you for that is because I find that you're right. A lot of mentors, they tend to push you more towards affluent customers, which on a business level makes a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, like, you as the business owner, you need to be able to run the business in a way that fulfills your personal mission. And if you don't want to go after those people who you feel don't really need that level of help that you are out to provide, then by all means, maybe you are going after the folks who, you like you say, they don't want to hear that rejection. They need a bit more kind of a supportive push. Then you want to make sure that the way that you price and even structure your programs are going to be appealing to that type of target customer. So yeah, start with who you want to serve, and then from there, then you can figure out how you're going to start with the pricing piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Curious to hear now. So as the business has grown and as it has changed, what are kind of the current offerings, and kind of how do you currently price it?
Yeah. So the thing that I'm doing the most is I do a lot of podcast production. And the reason I've really leaned into that is because at this point we have 1,200 episodes, and, we're doing this full time, and we're a multi six-figure business. And the majority of that is because we've figured out how to actually grow, scale, and monetize this podcast. So what I really do on the day-to-day is I'm working with clients who want more money, more impact, and more opportunity from their podcast. And a lot of what we do behind the scenes is we do all of the production. So we take care of the audio, the video, the show notes. We take care of the social media content and all of that happy jazz. And we have a very, what I would consider, I don't want to say general, but we have kind of a 3-tier pricing system where we have like a $297 a month package. We have a $497 a month package. And then we have a $697 a month package. So one of them is just the bare bones stuff. If you're looking to get started, you don't really know what you want, but you want to get the ball rolling, cool. We have a package for that. If you're somebody who you want to go above and beyond, and you want you want everything done, but then you want more of that. We have a package for that. I find that 75% of our potential clients end up landing in the middle package. And I think that's great, honestly, because I think it's giving you exactly what you need. And when we were pricing that, it's hard, right? Because there's two ways to do it. You can price it based on, how much money do we want to make? You can price it on how valuable do I think this is to the end user? But for me, it was, and this is not what I was taught, I want to make it sustainable. There's a huge difference between acquiring 25 clients a year and retaining 25 clients a year. And my goal is to retain clients, because at the end of the day, the longer the life cycle of the client, the more value we can ultimately add to them, and the more results they're going to get. I don't want somebody to come work with us, spend $15,000 and then say, how am I going to make $15,000 back? The truth is, you're not in the short run. And that's just not sustainable for most humans. So that's kind of how we set it up on sustainability, as much as how does it help the business out. Great.
And I think not only sustainable for you, but also sustainable for the client as well, because in today's current society of instant gratification, a lot of clients don't realize that a lot of stuff takes time to mature and results to actually come over time. Like, it doesn't happen right away. So having that approach where you're setting the expectation at the start that it's going to come over time, that helps both you, but also your client as well.
It allows me to tell the truth. I think that's an important facet is, it allows me to say to some people, look, if there is another company that's offering blank, 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 and blank, and it's more money, and maybe you think it's better, that's fine. Go do it. Maybe that's what's best for you. I will not guarantee the same level of result they're guaranteeing you, because I've seen behind the curtain of people who work with companies like that, and it's just not a realistic expectation. Yep. That's my thought. I would rather you say, wow, you guys are cheaper. What does that mean? Let me show you what it means. It means that I understand the end result that you're looking for. And I also realize that it's probably harder to get there than most people are admitting.
Cool. I'm curious to get your take on, in terms of the business model. So your approach currently is what we call the subscription-based and also tier-based model. So you have the 3 tiers, it's subscription. No surprise, generally subscriptions are more sustainable. You have more recurring income. It's easier to predict cash flow. On the other hand, you also have other models like, one-off purchases. I'm curious, have you heard of usage-based pricing? So that's kind of growing in popularity. And what are your thoughts on it if you're familiar with it? If you're not, then I'm happy to dive into that as well.
I have an idea based on the name, but I would love a little more context from you.
Yeah, for sure. So it's kind of the difference between, I'd say, when you look at how people try to convert people into these tier-based models, the most general approach is they offer usually like a free to try version. So sometimes there may be a free version where maybe like some content is free, some access is free. And then there's what they call the pay gate or the paywall. So after a certain thing, if you say, oh, I want this feature, then I have to upgrade kind of thing. It's similar as you switch between tiers as well. So you have a lower tier, and then you have a medium tier and a higher tier, and they all differ based on the level of service that you provide to someone. The usage-based pricing approach is it's kind of like if you ever use MailChimp or HubSpot. So you probably are familiar with how they price. It's free based on a certain number of subscribers that you have, or a certain number of users. And then after a certain level, like after 2,500 users, you pay a certain price. And then the pricing grows as your audience or as your usage grows as well. So that's why they call it usage-based pricing. It's growing in popularity because I think what a lot of companies are finding is you don't typically have to offer a trial period. So that shortens the sales cycle. You don't have to say, oh, it's a 1-week free trial. So if someone is a quote unquote power user, when they enter into the usage-based model, they get basically all the features for free right away. And then they realize that, oh, you know what? I actually need to use a lot more of the same stuff that I'm already using. Therefore, they upgrade usually immediately. So you tend to see those conversions happening, within like a few hours or even a few days, as opposed to waiting like a week or even a few months. So yeah, that's kind of the main approach. The other mentality behind that as well is, you scale as your client scales as well. So the more success your client sees, the more you are justified in charging them more as well. And therefore it helps scale both the value, but also both the profit as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great business model, and it makes a ton of sense. We have an app that we're creating, and it's kind of like, it's very similar to that, where, you know, if you want to track 3 habits or 6 habits or 9 habits, maybe it's free. But if you want to do, you know, 12 habits and something else, then you'd have to pay whatever, $3.99. I think that's a really good model. My wife got me an Aura ring for Christmas. And it's one of those things where it's interesting because it starts free and you get everything, right? But after a month, they say to you, hey, if you want to continue experiencing the pro plan or whatever, it's whatever it is, $4.99 or $9.99. I don't even know what it is yet. But yeah, I think that's a good business model. And I think the other thing too is and this is just my belief from what I've experienced, I think people drastically underestimate the value of free. I think people used to say, well, if you're giving something away for free, or if you're doing a free call, it's not going to be valued. I do not believe that. I am of the mind that if you make a connection with somebody and you give something away for free, and you also have a reputation in your brand that we are a valuable brand, I think free is a really, really good move. I always tell my clients, if you're moving into coaching for the first time, I say start free. Why not? Worst case scenario, you're doing market research. Best case scenario, you're getting paid to do market research and add value. I think that's a win-win-win.
And I'll add one more thing on top of that as well. I think the main kind of assessment between should I go free or should I charge is being intentional with how you utilize free. And what I mean by that is, I'll give kind of an unrelated or somewhat related example. So let's say, for example, even in activities that you run in your business, in the last company that I worked with, the CEO was saying, okay, look, we run a lot of events. Let's see if we can monetize through the events and try to make more profit through the events. And the main thing that they were selling is they have courses and programs. So the events, therefore, trying to monetize those activities doesn't really make a lot of sense because it's intentionally free as a marketing engine. So those are marketing related events and activities to help you kind of nurture your customer, bring in the right clientele as well. And it's not designed to convert and make profit. And if you intentionally go in and make it free, then you're seeing, okay, it is a marketing activity and you're acknowledging that. And therefore you're not seeing it as a waste of time. You're not saying like, oh, I'm running a whole bunch of events, I'm not making profit off them, why am I doing this kind of things? So as long as you're mindful about like, why are you doing the things that you're doing, then I think it's, yeah, you're right. It's absolutely okay to have certain things free in order to help move people towards that paid offering that you have down the line as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think free value is just such an underutilized thing, and it's greatly appreciated too. And I think that goes a long way with the audience and the potential clientele.
Related to kind of free versus price is I find that a lot of people, when it comes to pricing, especially the early entrepreneurs, a lot of it is reflected in their personal confidence. So I'd love to hear your take on, how do you price around confidence? How do you deal with that? And also, like, when it comes to confidence, like, how do you deal with imposter syndrome? A lot of people starting out feel like, I don't think I'm qualified to do this, therefore I'm not going to charge as much, or I don't think I'm actually delivering a lot of value. How do you deal with that sense of value and sense of self-worth?
Yeah. So you just use the 2 words that I would use instead of confidence. I would say self-worth. And this is just what I've seen. I've had people that have come to me and say, no, I'm way more valuable than that. I'm worth way more than that. I understand what you're saying, but in the very beginning, you are worth what the market will bear. And that just is the way it is. I mean, unless you have some sort of reputation or unless you have some sort of proof that you know exactly what you're doing, people are going to pay based on what they're going to pay. So in the beginning, my goal is always to figure out how do we help you get to an accurate level of self-worth. Now, all that means is this. If you have a level 1 self-worth, that means you are somebody who does not believe you are of value. If you have a level 9 self-worth, that probably means that you believe you are unreasonably valuable. How do we find accurate? what is an accurate level? So what I'm trying to do with people is say, well, why do you get to charge that much? And somebody might say, well, because that's how much I'm worth. And it's like, but what if somebody has been doing it for the same or for 10 times as long as you, and they're charging the same price? Do you think that's right? That's such an interesting thing, because again, that's kind of goes against what we learn. But I think people are missing the boat when it comes to this. I would rather you get 10 clients at a lower price and make a little bit less money. But how do those 10 clients pour into the rest of the business? How do those 10 clients give you lessons to serve more clients? What are you going to learn from them? What are you going to learn about yourself? So I'm always trying to help people level set their level of self-worth, because it's usually causing them to undercharge vastly or overcharge at their own detriment. That's what I've seen with that. I think that the confidence piece and the imposter syndrome piece is this. If you have imposter syndrome, it doesn't necessarily mean you're doing anything wrong. It doesn't necessarily mean you're not good enough. I think it's probably expected that most of us who are growth minded are going to have imposter syndrome for a long time, because every time you get really good at something, you start stretching your boundaries. So that's another reason I always suggest doing something for free. Here's why: because the expectation from your potential client is very low. So you can always over deliver. And when you feel like you're over delivering, I think that helps you get rid of the imposter syndrome. There's nothing worse than saying, I'm a coach, or I'm an entrepreneur, whatever, I'm a speaker, and then not practicing it, because you're talking way more than you're walking. And when that happens, I think that's actually creating more imposter syndrome. So I would say step number one is saying, look, I have imposter syndrome and I am terrified of what's going to happen here. I think step two is, there's a couple ways to create confidence. One way to create confidence is to lower the client's expectations, because then you can actually promise and over deliver. And I think that helps people with imposter syndrome. And then I think the third thing too is, and this is the play for some people, work on finding a certification, work on finding some piece of paper that says that you're worthy of doing what you're doing. I think for many people, a certification is a band-aid for imposter syndrome. And that's not a bad thing. I don't mean that in a negative way. We're in a society now where you don't really need a certification to do certain things. But if it makes you feel better and it makes you feel like you're going to get less questions from people, then maybe it's worth doing for you. But I do believe the best prescription, the best medicine for imposter syndrome is showing up and getting your hands dirty, although that is usually the hardest part as well.
Yeah. Very solid advice. And what I found interesting there as well is you talked about how people with a growth mindset tend to more often than not have imposter syndrome. And I think it's related to, if you're familiar with, or if you've heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect, kind of the more you know what you don't know. So yeah, you're right. Like a lot of folks, when they set out, they could end up in a situation where they're overconfident because they don't know what they don't know, and they don't know that there are a lot of other people out there who've done the same thing that they're doing, and therefore they are more justified in charging the prices that they have. Cool. Very, very interesting. One more last question I'd like to kind of get your take on is, how do you view the conversation around transparency and authenticity in pricing?
I am just a weirdo when it comes to this, because I don't know. I think a lot of us, we tend to hide behind words, and we say like, oh, if you're interested in the pricing, please reach out and we can have a conversation, or I'll tell you the pricing after the consultation. For me, it's like, this is our price. This is how much it costs. This is what you're going to get. Is that a line for you? No. Okay. No worries at all. I think that a lot of us we're trying to, I don't want to say trick. I don't want to use that word, but it's almost like we're trying to convince people to work with us, instead of just saying, this is what it is. Are you interested or not? And again, that just goes back to the sustainability thing. I remember, so this is the interesting thing. I had a potential client one time, and back then our pricing was higher. And I said, this is for what you're looking for, it's $1,500 a month. And the person said, could you do, if you're willing to do $1,000 a month, I'll throw this bonus in, and I'll sign up for 3 months right now. And I was so stubborn. And I said, no, it's $1,500 a month or nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up losing this client. This client ended up leaving us. Now, the problem is, I don't think I don't want to say authentic enough, but the truth is, I wasn't looking at the long-term benefit of working with that client when I could have done that. I could have been more authentic and said, you know what, maybe this isn't the actual price of what I wanted, but the fact that you're signing up for 3 months up front, the fact that you're going to allow us to plug on your podcast, like that's definitely valuable to me. So I think that we can be too firm in some of our decisions. And I think when you're transparent and when you're authentic, you can have those flexible conversations of, you know what, this is normally what we would do, but since you're willing to add value on your end, I think it's a line for me to also shift the way that I'm approaching it. I think that part of like the being a human, yes, we're running a business. Yes, I want to make sure that everything we do is value driven, and I want to make sure it's aligned with my values. But I also realize that you're offering us a different opportunity that maybe somebody else is. I can probably move on my end. So yeah, that's part of it. And I'm also the type of person who I'll have a conversation with somebody and I'll say, just give me a number. And people will say like, what do you mean? I said, what's your budget? Like, just throw me a number. If you throw me a number, I can try to find a way to make something work. Will it be everything that somebody else is getting? No, it can't. But it doesn't mean you and I can't work together in some way, shape, or form. And I think there's some flexibility behind that as well.
Yeah, I like that. I'd say everything is negotiable, right? Not everything needs to be in a specific rigid format, because people are all different and people have different needs. So maybe it's, willing to take a lower upfront cost in return, working with a client for a longer contract. Those kind of ideas can definitely apply as well. You mentioned that pricing changed a bit over time. Kind of, how do you approach the exercise of experimenting with pricing and testing the different pricing? Like, do you have a very scientific approach? Do you look for certain patterns in the data? Do you run certain experiments over a period of time? Like, how do you approach it?
Yeah. So what started for us, and I think this is a troubling thing for many of us, we unfortunately built that part of the business off of an anomaly. So the first client I ever got was not somebody who was in our community. They were a referral to me. And this person was just not the run-of-the-mill client that we would normally serve. So our pricing was based on that. Our pricing was based on, okay, this is a busy CEO, a busy entrepreneur, and somebody who has a lot of extra money that they just want to pay us to make these problems go away. How much are they willing to pay? This is the number. Cool. That's what we're going to run. After I just kind of went off of feedback. And then I tried to look at the demographics. For me, I would rather work with somebody who I'm more aligned with in terms of their mission and their character than somebody who might have more money to spend. So I just started having conversations with people and realizing, $1,500 a month is a lot of money. And that is a commodity for a podcast. Like, not a lot of people are going to want to invest $1,500 a month for a podcast, but what can somebody afford? That really is what it was. What can somebody afford, and how do we create the systems to make that sustainable for us? That was based on a lot of people coming to me and saying, honestly, I can't move on that at that price. And I also realized too, Chin, I think this is the other thing. I never would have paid that amount of money either. That's another important facet of, like, I wouldn't pay $1,500 a month for that. As a podcaster who would also want my problem solved, what would I pay? I would pay $497 for sure. Okay, cool. That's more aligned anyway.
Yeah, good insights. I'll share something on my end as well that I've learned over time. I had a good sales mentor of mine. He taught me about this concept called the decision threshold. And the idea there is basically that as people evaluate different options in front of them, whatever option it may be, whether it's to try a new product, wear a new shoe, the subconscious thing that goes on in your head is they're evaluating what is the risk of changing versus what is the risk of staying the same. So an example there would be, if the risk of changing might be, I have to learn a new product. I have to change my processes. Maybe there's cost. right? Maybe that I have to train my team members. Those are all costs of changing. And then the cost of staying the same is, what am I missing out on? Am I missing out on certain opportunities? Maybe I'm wasting a lot of time. Maybe there's, let's say, regulatory, changes that make my old system kind of moot, and I have to certify or else I'll be fine, kind of thing. So what are the costs of staying the same versus the cost of changing? And usually people will make the decision to change if the cost of staying the same outweighs the cost of changing. So very simply put, that's the very basic equation. And sometimes if your pricing is too high, then obviously it's going to increase the weight of changing. And therefore, it makes it harder for someone to make that leap or decide to actually go forward with the change.
Yeah.
This is exactly why you mentioned like free can be very valuable, because when you bring down pricing, or if you have a free tier of some sort, people are more likely to take that risk to actually try something new. And then once they've had one foot in the door, it's a lot easier for you to kind of sell them into other offerings as well, so to speak. So it's not so much about being manipulative, but just being strategic about how you tier your offerings such that you can expose people to different levels of value so that they're more comfortable with actually making the next level of change.
And even in like the recurring part of the business, I want it to be so smooth and seamless that you can't go back. Not that you can't, but it wouldn't make sense for you. It would be illogical for you to take that step back. That's the whole other part of the sustainability part.
Yeah.
It's, again, getting people to sign up for something is one thing, but getting them to sign up month after month based on a place of value and an exchange of that's also a huge part of it too.
Yeah. Great. Very tangible and very actionable insights. So thanks for your time. I think, we can pretty much wrap up the main portion of this now. I'm curious to hear, so if people want to learn more about you, about Next Level University, where should they go? How can they find out more about you?
Yeah, so our podcast, we do 7 episodes a week, so we're there every single day. All you got to do is search Next Level University. We are on all the podcast platforms as well as YouTube. And then I think other than that, the best place to go would be the website, because that has everything that we do. It's called nextleveluniverse.com.
Great. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for your time. Any final words for the audience before we leave?
No, I think we were all over the place in all the right places, and I just enjoyed it, and I appreciate you having me on, my friend.
For sure. Thank you so much.